Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 115. My name is NBZ, and I have returned from the sweltering jungles of Brussels back home. And Bali, you now have your house back without an extra person lying on your floor, so I'm sure that's nice.
That's very nice. I got all this space. We have played a lot of video games. I've kind of had a day or two off in video games because of that weekend. It was quite intense. A bit of a detox is what I need. Yeah,
got to take one of those every once in a while. I didn't. I just plowed on and finished Valkyria Chronicles.
Well, there you go.
That's the thing. Each of their own, but hey, I visited you in Brussels. It was cool, and I should also mention that we recorded a Patreon exclusive podcast while I was over there. It's the third episode of our TNL Rank series where we talked about our favorite video game systems. So hey, it's worth the $2 if you go over to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. Give that a listen. It's fun because we did it in person and we don't get to do that often.
Yeah, check it out. We had a really good time recording that one. I think we covered a lot talking about every system under the sun practically. It was a good one.
Yeah. Stories from the past, all that good stuff. It was a fun time.
If you want stories from the past, that's your go-to. It's a good one.
Absolutely. But hey, we're not living in the past today. This is the present. This is the new show. So, Bali, tell people what the show's going to be today. It's the new show.
We've been playing so much that we thought we'll do a 2-segment show. So, first segment, what we've been playing. It's going to be slightly longer than normal. And then second segment, we're going to have some of your emails. So, like I said, 2-segment show.
Yeah, it was a very kind of regimented thing that you had done. You're like, all right, I'm going to write this list and we're going to go through this list and tick off what we're going to play on this list.
It sounds crazy, but when we were growing up, I feel like we'd always talk on the phone or on Skype or MSN Messenger before going to each other's houses, and we'd be like, we're going to try this, we're going to play this, we're going to do that, and then by the time we got to each other's houses, we'd just dive deep on one game and not touch anything else. And then often...
You mean all we did was just play Pokemon every day and never looked at any other video game?
That was also a thing, but we'd sort of... I think sometimes a balance of making sure that we tried a little bit of a number of games we wanted to play was sometimes usurped by, we just want to play this one game. So I was like, MZ's coming over for the weekend. There's a number of things we want to play. I'm going to make sure we're going to at least try and play a little bit of everything. And I think, we managed to do that. So
we did, yeah. So I guess then let's kick things off with the video games we've been playing. And Bali, you actually played through this entire game before I came, and then I got to try a bit with you and Caroline, but take it away.
Yeah, it was Lovers in a Dangerous Spacetime, which I think came out on Steam and PS4 in 2015.
I own it for free on Steam, so that tells you how long ago it came out, probably, because eventually all games just end up in my Steam library. So yes.
So, since we were playing Overcooked, we loved that game. We wanted to try more co-op experiences. We also played Snipper Clips, of course, and
right, yeah.
We were like, what else on Switch is co-op? Oh, here's a good one. You'd said good things about it at MBZ. Lots of people online have said good things about this game, and we were like, let's do it. We had Easter break off, so we were like, let's get a game that we can play together over Easter break, and we really sort of piled in a few hours into this game, and it's essentially a cool co-op take on a space shooter, and it sounds really simple, but it essentially makes your ship slower, but because you're slower, it also makes your ship more powerful in a way, I guess, but everything moves a bit more slowly because it is a bit of a faff trying to control the ship, because ultimately each character is doing their own task within a ship, and this scales from 2 to 4 players.
Right, so you have 4 guns and you have a shield and you have the boosters, so you have this little character who's inside the ship, and you have to physically move that character from left, right, up and down, walking upstairs to get to their controls. So it's this idea of dealing with a bunch of shit on screen whilst also scrambling your little dude around to get to the right place at the right time.
Yeah, being able to sort of pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time is quite useful in this game, because you're often finding yourself like you need to look outside to see what's happening, what needs addressing. Like, do you need to activate your shield and make sure that's protected, or should you just get the hell out of dodge and boost your ship away? And it's a nice combination. Like, I was always of the opinion, like, you need to stand your ground and fight. Like, you need to defeat all these waves of enemies, clear them out, and then you can move on. So my view was that the advantage of staying on the spot was one person was on shield and the other was on the gun. So you had some versatility in protecting.
Right, so you always have someone blocking, basically.
Right. Whereas when you're on the move, normally you have one person on the engine to move, and then the other person might be on the shield or a gun. So you either are moving defensively and the enemies are building up around you, or you're moving offensively and then you're risking taking damage because no one's on the shield. So I was always of the opinion we can have shield and gun by staying on the spot, but at the same time, sometimes the waves of enemies get so strong that they just attack you from the back, and your shield can only defend one side at a time. So it's interesting. And like you said, there's 4 guns, an engine, a shield, there's a navigation spot, and they're sort of like what we nicknamed the Kahuna, which is like this chargeable gun that charges it takes about a minute to charge, maybe less than that, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and it lets off a huge stream.
It's like a super attack, essentially.
It's like yeah, exactly. And it lets off a huge stream, so that you ultimately have those 7 stations, and it's a really nice mix. Even with 2 players, it works really well. I read online that apparently the game was designed originally for only 2 players. And it's interesting because I think definitely the formula isn't as addictive and fast-paced as Overcooked. It's a very different style of game. I said a while ago I think I might like it more than Overcooked, but I don't know. Stepping back, I need to think about it, because this game does a lot of things that Overcooked doesn't. Overcooked can feel quite repetitive after a while, and if you're kind of a little burned on that idea, this game feels a lot more fresh, where it throws more of a variety of things at you, and I definitely enjoyed that.
That's interesting to me, because having played both over the weekend, to me Overcooked felt way more fresh and interesting, just because the design of every map made you play it differently, right? Like, you're either dealing with moving trucks or sliding ice or some weird combination, where from what I played of Lovers, like the few levels and the stuff that I saw of your later game was like, okay, we're going through this space field to find the rabbits, and the space fields kind of all look the same. And it seems like the objectives are not super varied. So from my perspective, it felt like
you're always going through a space field to find rabbits, or you're defending there's certain levels where it's just waves of enemies coming at you, and your ship stays on the spot, and you're defending an extra engine that you have to make sure doesn't get blown up, or you're fighting a boss. Those are the 3 types of levels, and that's it. So yeah, I can see that your point. Like, Overcooked does introduce new level designs, and I definitely did enjoy that. I do think that Lovers in a Dangerous Spacetime could have tried to mix it up a bit more somehow. I don't really know how. I should also mention there are stuff like power gems, and there's 3 different types of gems, and you use the gems to put onto the stations, and you eventually upgrade your ship where each station can hold 2 gems. And a bit like Kirby in a way, you're sort of changing a gun into a laser beam or a spiked ball, or when you can insert 2 gems, you can insert a laser gem and a metal gem, and that'll make it like a laser spiked ball, for example. And so, like, you can stack up different power combinations to give a variety to the guns. And by the end of the game, if you are stuck on like the final boss, like we actually were for quite a while, you can actually go back, make sure you collect a lot more gems, give all your guns, all 4 guns, and your boost and your shield all these power-ups, and then take on the boss again. So like, it does add things to the formula to like mix it up a bit.
Sure. So there's a lot of like I guess customization when it comes to that, and I know that you can unlock different ships and that kind of thing. The one thing that I found very interesting about it was, because you are like inside this ship, your characters are quite small and they're quite hard to see, and especially when there's 3 people in there's sometimes when you're like crossing over with someone or you're bumping into each other, and they do distinguish by color, but I did find myself like having to squint a bit and also like having a little bit of trouble, but like, okay, get up the ladder, no, get off there, no, don't go down the ladder, no, like my character didn't quite go where I wanted him to, and maybe that's just because I didn't have enough experience playing the game that like you'd built up over time, but it was a little bit finicky, just like moving from area to area.
There's definitely a bit of muscle memory that builds up when it comes to getting from one station to another. Certainly for most of the game, I was going between engine and shield, and those like that little ladder is quite near each other, and I kind of got very used to that movement. I agree, that at first was quite like, where am I going? What part of the ship? You eventually,
I guess it will take like a while to acclimatize and stuff like that. But,
and that's when like you get new ships and the ladders are all different, and you're like, oh god, where is everything? And it's like, ugh.
Oh no, they have to relearn everything. Oh,
but that mixes it up at the same time. So yeah,
sure.
I mean, I would highly recommend this game. I think as a concept, I think Overcooked's more interesting, you're right, but this does some really great things, and I would highly recommend it.
Well, I don't know that Overwatch is necessarily more interesting as a concept.
Overcooked.
I just think it varies the gameplay more in terms of throwing different like challenges at you. Like the variety of each level in Overcooked seems distinctly different from the previous one, whereas Lovers, because it's like, okay, I'm just finding the bunnies, it seemed Lovers to me seemed more like a roguelike in the sense that the levels felt randomly generated, and I don't know if that's the case or not.
It actually, I think they are randomly generated, because we went back, we died on a few levels, went back into them, and then the level was different, as basically.
And I'm not a huge fan of random generation, so that maybe plays into
it's
my
not
feelings,
ideal.
But yeah, it's cool.
The level design's not that interesting, perhaps.
Right.
Like, it's basically
because I guess that's not really the focus. The focus is like trying to multitask with each other and figuring things out. And I imagine being 2 players, it would have been a much more frantic affair, because when I jumped in, I was like, okay, I'm just going to move where we need to go. And multiple times you were like, oh no, let's stay and fight. But we kind of realized that I think because there were 3 players, you didn't have to have that mentality of someone needs to be on shield and someone needs to be on guns.
Exactly.
Because you could be on shield all the time, and Caroline could be on guns, and I could just be moving. So it was okay, and it worked.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I was interested to see whether the game scaled at all in terms of number of enemies.
Did you think that it got harder when?
It's hard to tell. I kind of would side with not really, or if it does, it doesn't kind of scale enough, because I personally found it, like you said, once you got the combination of shield and gun and one person on engine, you're fine. But even if you do my tactic of stand and fight, you now have 2 people on guns and one person shielding. Like it's even more perfect for that scenario at the same time. So I do think it gets easier, and I'm pretty impressed we beat that final boss with 2-player, me and Caroline. But I think it's a great game on Switch. I think it's a vibrant game. The world that it creates is funny. Like this whole idea of love and the different animals,
goofy little characters, very nicely
and there's
animated.
one point where the 3 of us were playing as like a falcon, a fox, and a frog, and it's like it's like Star Fox,
and they're literally the exact same colors as well.
Yeah,
so
funny. So
that
don't know if that was on
nicely.
purpose or not, but
but it has like nice little touches, like the animation that Caroline was trying to show me, where if someone's on the engine and someone else walks up to them, they like have this little smokestack goes up and they have like a fight with each other, and like one gets thrown out.
Yeah, and it basically the game is flipping a coin between those 2 characters, and one of them takes over the controls. It's good. Yeah,
nice attention to detail with stuff like that. I enjoyed it.
So yeah, we played Overcooked and Love is in Danger. I should say Love is in Danger, Spacetime, and Overcooked. Did you?
Yes.
You tried a bit of both of these co-op games, and as you said, we played them with Caroline and MBZ. What was your take?
Overcooked is really frantic in a way that I didn't think it would be, because I've watched some of it before. And it seems like, okay, you definitely need to be on top of organization and knowing where to go and making sure people have the right tasks and being able to get things done. And the thing I think I underestimated was fixing my attention between what the orders are and what I need to do and what has been done and what hasn't been done. Because sometimes...
I think it might have also been more intimidating by the fact that you were jumping in with two people, me and Caroline, who had gotten 3 stars on every single level in the game, including DLC, and we just MBZ just jumps into the game. We're like, go here, do that. What are you doing? Why are you burning that? Where are you going? And you're just like, oh my god, what have I got myself
I did
into?
feel like a bit of a sous chef in Gordon Ramsay's kitchen at some point. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, Caroline just turns into Gordon Ramsay. Yeah.
It was fun though. Like, and then there's this one moment where one map where it splits me like on my own on one side of a conveyor belt and you two on the other, and I'm like doing fucking everything, and I'm just like losing my mind, and I'm just I can't handle this. This is too much. But yeah, the little annoyances the game has though, I think sometimes it's a little bit hard to. And this creates like the confusion and chaos of it, I guess, but like locking onto like what you need to pick up, you're like, I wanted to pick that up, fuck, why didn't I pick that up? Like the angles, because it like highlights certain places for you to place vegetables and like pick them up and where you need to chop them. So it can get a little finicky, but I guess that's kind of in the spirit of the game. Maybe I'm giving it a bit too much credit, but and the other thing that doesn't help with that is because it's a 30 frames per second game, it's a little bit more clunky in that sense. It's not as smooth in terms of like moving your characters around. So that was the one thing I was like a little disappointed in, but I know they had frame rate problems before, and seems like they fixed them. Like it wasn't bad, like it ran at 30 fine, but it wasn't like kind of, maybe I wanted the smoothness would have helped with maybe putting things down and picking things up, but I don't know. And yeah, it was really kind of just knowing what had been served and what hadn't, and making sure you have everything ready for what's coming up as well, and making sure that you're serving things at the right time, whilst also making sure that things are washed and you have enough plates, because if you put it on without a plate, then you'd get fucking nothing. So it's a balancing act that is, it feels like the timer is pressuring you in a much greater way than I think it actually is, but it's just like a bit of chaos to throw into the mix. But yeah, I liked it, and
there's ice levels,
yes, which I just decided to give up on, and I think I was just washing plates the whole time in that map because I couldn't do anything else. I was like, you guys deal with this, I have no idea, I'm falling off the side.
You may say I was just washing up plates, but honestly, someone washing up plates on some of those maps is so important. And
it is, yeah,
like we're talking about scaling with Love is in a Dangerous Spacetime, it wasn't really clear to me how it scaled for 3 players. And
no, it seemed like the point threshold went up higher.
Maybe a little bit, but it felt like the actual mechanics in game didn't change at all. And
no,
ultimately, in some aspects, it kind of felt harder than easier, just because it was 3 players and it was 3 of us trying to coordinate versus 2 of us. And that's an interesting take on it.
Yeah, but it's cool. It's definitely one of those games that you have to have someone to play with, because it's really, you can't. Both these games are like, they're multiplayer only. You need people. So yeah, it was good to try both of those out, and in a 3-player setting, they both work well for that stuff. So that's cool.
Next game. This is a game that you picked up on the cheap, MBZ.
Yeah. So when I'm in London, I usually go around to like the secondhand game shops here and try and find some gems, mostly from the GameCube or Wii era is where I usually look for stuff. And I found Steven Spielberg's fine classic Boom Blox sitting there for £1.50. And I saw it, I was like, I remember people talking about this on podcasts and saying, like, this is actually a really good game, and me being like, I don't know, this is a Steven Spielberg game, that doesn't seem right. And yet, yes, because I remember, I think O&M reviewed it, and they gave it a really good score, and I remember hearing things about it, and it was about, like, throwing things at towers, and I was like, okay, this seemed like an interesting motion control thing, but I'm not sure how it's going to work. So we gave it a go, and I think your initial impressions were like, this seems a little bit mini-game-esque and a bit...
My initial impression was, man, this is an ugly game. And the things that it's asking you to do look far too simplistic and boring.
Right.
But the second you ramp that up a little bit and put it into a multiplayer setting, it's a really cool idea, I think.
Yeah, so the idea of Boom Blox is it's basically reverse Jenga, where instead of like trying to take little blocks out and not make the tower fall, you're chucking balls at towers and you want them to just fucking collapse.
Angry Birds in 3D.
Yeah, it kind of is Angry Birds before Angry Birds. I'm trying to think whether this came out before or after.
It must have been. I think Angry Birds was like at the start of uni, or like a little bit before that.
No, I don't know. Angry Birds has been around for a long time. It's been around for a long time, so I don't know. But the idea is that you're using the Wii remote, and you are kind of rotating around these towers, and then you're like holding down A and chucking a ball at it. And depending on the intensity of your throw, that's how like heavy it'll hit the tower. And the tower is made up of numbered blocks. And I think we figured out that it's not necessarily the number that makes it hard to take down, because the number is just the amount of points you get for knocking it over. It's more the size.
Yeah, we thought the number was weight, but it's not, right?
Right, it's the size of the block, which is like how heavy it is and how hard it is to take down. I think
all the blocks are like the same. Each sort of 1 by 1 cube, if you imagine a cube, is like the same density. So it doesn't, if like a block is 4 cubes long, it's 4 times the weight of a single cube.
Right. And so the whole idea being that if you chuck it at like this massive rectangle in the middle, it's not going to move. Like no matter how hard you throw it, because it is a solid like brick that is stuck there in the center. And kind of figuring out what to take down, but also what not to leave open for your opponent was definitely a tricky challenge. And Bally just came through as this MLG pro and was just fucking destroying me, because I would be like, okay, this seems like a good opening here. There's like a 4 sticking out, so I'll like get rid of that 4. And Bally is like, what about this other 4 that's around the corner? And then he takes that out, and all of a sudden everything just fucking topples because he's put it off balance, and he gets like 100,000 points in one turn. I'm like, Christ, Bally, like now I have no points to get on this tower, and you've just taken them all away from me. And I don't know whether that was my fault for setting you up so many times, or whether you just have the ability to know, like, this is where the physics are here. I don't know how your spatial awareness is, your spatial reasoning is like, but it must be better than mine, because you were...
It's because I was putting my shoulder out, throwing my ball at the towers. That's the difference.
Right, you woke up the next day and you're like, oh god, my shoulder's hurting.
It's like the good old days of Wii Sports. Like, man, exactly. My shoulder's sore.
I mean, look, you are the person who threw a Wii remote out a window, so it's only fair.
I did. There's no getting away from that fact.
Yeah, but it seems like there's a lot to this game that we didn't really get into, because it seems like a whole single player campaign, and there are other like modes and stuff, and there's also like different types of blocks. So like there's an invisible block, which if you hit it, it will just disappear, and so that can be helpful if you have a very kind of unstable group of like blocks above it, and they just all collapse underneath. And then you have like chemical blocks, which if one of them hits another one, it causes an explosion. Bombs that cause an explosion. And there was also stuff about like, there was a part of the tutorial I was doing where I was just like grabbing a square and just like holding it and like waggling it around to just destroy things, and I'm like, this is a little bit weird. It was like pinging back and forth like a whip almost. But there seems to be a lot more in the game than what we experience, and I think I'm going to play the single player when I get back to my kind of Wii U and put that in and give that a go.
Yeah, they play a lot around that basic physics engine that they've built, and it's a it's quite an impressive engine. Like all the certainly, I would argue a lot of the ways that those towers were like falling and the blocks were being blown out of the structure felt quite realistic in a way, and made sense.
Yeah, it did, and it's very satisfying when you topple something, right? Because like they all explode, and then, like all the nice sounds happen. It does all the stuff you want it to, and then like they change it up, and they're like, oh, here's a bowling ball, and weirdly that didn't really seem like it helped, because they gave us just a much bigger tower.
Yeah, it's like the same weight as a ping pong ball.
Right, exactly. Because we were like chucking it, I'm like, oh, this doesn't really change it that much, But yeah, it's a very simple concept, but from what we played, I really enjoyed it, and I'm like, wow, this is... I see why people talked about this so highly back in the day, because ultimately, motion controls were a thing that were like very hit or miss, and like there are a lot of bad minigame collections that came out that people were like, steer clear, this is bad. This is one of those motion control focused games that I think really works and actually feels good as well. Like I like using B to like scroll around the tower and like use my motion to like manipulate that. It feels smooth.
That aspect is fun, but I think we agreed that it would just feel better and save my shoulder if you could just point and click in a way where,
or at least make it so that you had like a power meter, right? Instead of like basing the power on the strength of your throw, base the power on a little meter that you decided beforehand, or even hold, like, you know, like in a Wii Sports baseball where you'd hold down the D-pad to do a spin throw or whatever, or a curveball. Like do something like that in order to change the power of your throw, because we had a bit of discussion. We're like, well, would you ever want to do a throw that's not at max power? You know, because you're trying to take things down, and I don't know if you would or not, because I haven't played enough of the game. But
games in the Wii era, they would do anything to make sure you were swinging your arm, because that's what made it appealing for perhaps a younger audience. And they're like, I want to swing my arm and I want to throw the ball, and it's if we had played this back in the day during the Wii era, I think we would have come away from it being like, this is one of our favorite Wii games, you know, because it was really leaning into that stuff. And I may have been in a Mario Kart situation where I may have resented this game because you're clearly way better at it than I am. And so, like, I remember, like, you know, playing Mario Kart Wii and, like, always losing and, like, hating Mario Kart Wii because I was just not good enough at it. But I don't know. This game is just fun enough on its own, and just the whole idea of people like things when they topple, right? Like, it's an innate human thing. It's satisfying.
That is this weird fascination with things like being destroyed. Like, people love watching buildings on a demolition site just fall down.
Right.
And there's a horror to it, of course, but also like there's this weirdness of like something just crashing and being destroyed. So,
yeah.
There you go. Boom Blox, you throw things
cool.
at towers.
Yeah. Good game. I'd love to see an HD remake. That'd be good. Well,
you know, you complain about the visuals, but I actually thought it looked really good coming through your Wii U on the HDMI cable. Like, a lot better than I imagined a Wii game on a TV like that looking. So I was like, I was actually kind of impressed.
Oh, it looked good in that sense. It was just some of the, I don't know, the art and the
What, you mean the characters? The little domino people who just change the texture of?
Yeah, the Minecraft characters.
Yeah, it kind of has a bit of a Minecraft feel to it, I guess. But like all the characters are basically like these rectangles who have just been reskinned. Like in the Halloween level, there was, or like when we were trying to clear out pipes, basically. So there's a game type that was slightly different where you had like Halloween heads above the tower, and you had to knock out blocks from the tower to make it basically like a sink, kind of pour out water almost and pull the Halloween blocks down. And all these guys around were just like skeleton rectangle guys with arms and legs like flopping about. And then on the main menu there's just like squirrels and sheep and all these different animals. And it's like kind of Me-esque in a way, you know, with like the idea that they're all based on the same model, but we're just reskinning them every time kind of idea. Yeah. So I guess in the Wii era, they were leaning into that stuff a bit. And I never threw a ball at one of them. I really wanted to try to see if you could throw a ball at one of the guys on the side and see if it hit them in the face and whether they reacted or not. But I didn't try because I was trying to beat you and failing miserably.
In competitive mode.
Yeah, absolutely. Had to be competitive. But yeah, Boom Blox is cool. I'm glad that I picked it up for that price. We got a good amount of fun out of it, and I still think I'm going to go back and try the full single player.
Nice.
So looking forward to it. So yes, what's next on the list, Bally?
We also played a bit of 1-2 Switch.
This was very short amount because it was right before I was going to leave. So
yeah, we're like, wait, this is the last game on the list. We got to fit it in, and we said,
yeah.
So we did like maybe 3-4 games from 1-2 Switch.
All the ones that I was interested in, basically.
Yeah, I think you were pretty keen to check out a ball count where you can sense the balls and the little motors in the Switch working. I think it's impressive. I mean, what did you think?
I think it's very impressive, actually, because I didn't at any time think, oh, this is how this is being done. I just felt it, and I was like, oh, this works, you know? Like, I wasn't going in and being like, oh, well, what are the little technical aspects of this rumble and how it's achieving this? It's like, oh, no, there are 3 balls in here, and I can feel 1 hit, and then 2 hit, and then 3 hit, and then you kind of shake them around, and shaking them around doesn't really help. And I guess like you had already figured out, and I kind of figured out as I was doing it, that like the best way to do it is just be really slow about it, and wait for one ball to hit the wall, and wait for the next one and the next one, and every hit you feel like indicates how many balls there are. Although this can be tricky for people if people aren't paying attention. They're like 1, 2, because the first ball will usually just hit it without you feeling, and then it'll be like 1, 2 for the second 2, and you'll be like, oh, it's 2 balls, but it's not. It's actually 3. Yeah. So it can be a little bit tricksy on you. It's cool though. It worked. It was fine. I also liked the rotation one, where you had to put it on the table and be very careful about moving your entire body around. Basically, you want to place it in a way so that like your arm is backwards, so that you can get a full rotation. And I was getting some fucking crazy rotations, like some fucking 570 degree shit that worked well, and you had some trouble with that one. But it's one of those that I can see like people who practice at it doing insane shit, like doing like 1,000 degree angles in one go, for sure. And especially like if you have, I imagine like a stool instead of a table, like just going round in circles constantly, just round the stool and just rotating it.
Right.
It's funny because I'm playing Skyrim at the moment, and it reminds me of the lock-picking minigame in Skyrim a little bit, like rotating a thing. So kind of felt like that a little bit. The treasure box one was fine. Did that once, just like take a chain off a treasure box. Very kind of motion control-y.
Pretty simple motion controls, yeah.
And then the main one, I guess, that was fun was Quick Draw.
What about the milking?
Oh, right, we did do milking. I was bad at milking. You just seemed very...
There's a real technique to the milking.
I felt like I was getting there, but I wasn't quite the mastery of 17 Cups Bally over here, who was just chugging the milk out of that cow. It is weird though, because it's like, look at the person, and we're just like staring each other in the eyes as we just milk. It's really weird.
1 2 Switch is a weird game, and like what it's fucking wanting strange. From you, like it's wanting you to look at each other while you're doing all these things. It makes a lot more sense in something like Quick Draw, but when you're like milking a cow and you're like looking at each other doing the movement, and you're kind of each copying each other's movement, and it's like, and then I sort of saw you copying me. I was like, I can't let him copy my exact one. I'll speed up. So I started going harder and faster.
Did, and then you messed me up real bad when you started doing that. I was like, oh no, I'm losing it. Yeah. So that was good fun.
But there's a good feedback with the milking one. I appreciate, where, because you're not meant to look at the screen. If you look at the screen, you can actually see like how strong the spray is that you're generating.
It actually made me do worse, because like I started looking at the screen for the last like 30 seconds the first time we did it, and I just kept getting nothing, and I was like, why? Like,
but just closing your eyes almost and just feeling that rumble. I mean, you're meant to look at each other, so that's what you should do, but like just feeling the rumble, like it is quite accurate when it just rumbles a lot more when you're getting a really good squeeze. But it's fun.
Yeah, milk was fine. And then we did the Quick Draw, and we did Fake Draw as well, which is when he just shouts out like fly, fruitcake, flabbergaster, like things that are almost F words that start with fire but aren't, and then you finally have to do it.
That's fun.
You're too good at that game. I never beat you. We did like 5-6 times, couldn't beat you once. Just too fast. Your reaction times.
Like 1 2 Switch it's a nice group of games. The present, I really enjoy the presentation. I think like they're done well, and
like especially the goofy videos that happened beforehand. Those are funny.
It's great for like a few drinks and a party with people who are eager to make fun of themselves. A real sort of charades environment. Like if people are up for that, then you can be like, oh, let's play some 1 2 Switch, and like I think it's got enough fun in it to have a good couple hours of fun with a few drinks and a big group of people, but perhaps one with just 2 people who are sober taking it quite seriously, it's got far less to offer perhaps.
Yeah, I kind of am like, well, if I never play 1 2 Switch again in my life, I think I'm fine. It's like like I played those games, I'm like, all right, cool.
I mean, it would have taken like another 20 minutes to half an hour to play every single game with you. We did the sword fighting one as well, and like,
the sword fighting one sucked. I didn't like that.
Yeah, it's not direct enough, but it's a nice idea, and there's another 15 or so games you could have tried, but then once you would have seen them all, I think there's no reason to go back to that again until you're with another group who's never seen this game before. So I'm always the person who's played these games a million times, teaching every single one how to play. And that's part of the reason I was really good at stuff like the milking and the quick draw, because I've done these games so many times. But it's a nice package to have along with the Switch, just to mix things up every now and then.
They should have packed it in, man. Should have packed it in. Absolutely.
Keep
saying, but oh well. And then we also played some fighting games, mainly Smash Brothers. Did a bit of Street Fighter 2.
Went deep on Smash. Deep.
Yeah, well, quickly, let's talk about Street Fighter 2, because I could tell the whole time you're like, I need to be done with this.
Yeah.
Like, you are so not into that game in a way that I can clearly tell. And you're just like so checked out.
I've never gotten into a fighting game other than Soul Calibur 2, to be honest. I don't think Smash counts at all as a traditional fighter. It's very much
it's not
a fighter. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a different thing.
And there was a handful of matches that were tight that I did enjoy, but I didn't...
I think the thing about Street Fighter 2 is it makes it so that people get to those situations. Like, it seems like the sort of game where you will often be at a tiny percentage away from winning, you know?
Yeah.
And so, like, with us, who we both suck ass at it, we still had a good amount of fun, because there is a level of tension there when you're getting down to like the final hit, and it's like, oh god, who's gonna get it, and you know, and it does the slow down when you finally get it. It's cool. And we went through all the characters, and I'd played some of this before with some people, and it was fun then, and I enjoyed it, and I was like, this game actually controls really well. And that's one thing that surprised me about it, was it feels good and tactile and better than a lot of like other fighting games I've tried. And I see why people talk about Street Fighter 2 in like such hushed tones, like it's one of the greatest games of all time, all this stuff, because it feels great. And even for someone who doesn't like using up to jump in a fighting game, I think it worked fine. And like, you can jump forward and do rolls and backwards.
Do that body slam. Who's the
body
sumo
slam,
Japanese player?
Whatever, the massive sumo guy. I can't remember. He's basically DDD in that game. And and you just kept spamming that move. I was like, oh god, how do I stop this? But like, having the simplicity of just holding back to block is great. You know, and you just need to duck block to duck a low hit or a middle hit or whatever. And there's clearly a lot of complexity to it, but as people who are just kind of futzing our way through it, I thought it was fun. I enjoyed a bit of Street Fighter 2. So.
Yeah, it's cool. Again, like you suggested, I'm not massively keen to go back to it. Half the fun was like, I'm playing as Ryu. This is the classic music. This is a classic game.
Yeah.
I'm having a classic experience. This is great. And then it's like, I'm a bit tired of it. The novelty's worn off, and I just can't get my head around these mechanics, basically.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That is the thing with fighting games, is it feels like you need to lock yourself in a room and learn, and then you can let yourself out and kind of really get
if I wanted to do that, I'd rather do it with Smash any day of the week than sort of get into something
you've kind of already done it with
I
Smash
kind of
in
already
a way,
have, but I could go deeper. I can get better with Mario.
Of course you
can. Don't you worry, I'm going to get better.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. And then we just basically had a Smash bloody orgy of just going through everything possible.
Event matches and trophies and smashes.
Yeah, we rediscovered the idea of co-op event matches, which is such a great idea. And I don't know if I can't remember if they did it in Brawl or not, but the notion of like going through all these situations, we're joking that this is the real story of Smash Brothers that Sakurai has cooked up in his head, of all these just situations.
Yeah, because they've all got these hilarious scenarios based on the Nintendo universe.
Yeah, and so like the one that we spent the most time on was, I think, one that I've already done on my own copy of the game, but where you have to use Fox and Falco to stop a bunch of Game & Watches from falling onto the platforms, and if they land, you fail. And there's like 40 of them, and they start getting faster, some of them have parachutes, and it gets very chaotic, and we need to like have a kind of strategy of like you staying one side and me staying the other, and just making sure that we had each other's backs when we needed to, and just get the Game & Watches off there. And they're like one-hit kills and stuff, but you can miss one thing and you're done. And it happened a couple of times where like one to go and I just fucking whiffed on it, and I was like, no! Yeah. It just feels awful. But like finally breaking through and finishing that was awesome. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's made me really excited again for Smash. Of course, I was already excited, but it'd been a while since we'd played any together, and there's so many trophies I still hadn't unlocked, and just sitting there unlocking them and reading each one in depth. And I'm gonna go back and like read through all the trophies that we unlocked.
Yeah, we didn't really read them. We were just like looking at the trophies mainly, but
staring. But
staring, yeah.
Just it's there's a lot of great stuff to dig deep on with that game, and I want to do a bit of digging.
One of my favorite things about the presentation of that game is the cabinets, because like you basically have this visual representation of them like in this glass box, and it gets a nice little complete sign on it when you've got every trophy in that particular set, and so like it really made me, like back when I was playing a ton of Smash, want to unlock every trophy in a particular like game or like, you know, a series or whatever. And so I had like a full Xenoblade cabinet, and I'm like, oh look, this is fucking awesome, like how cool this looks. So yeah, it's great. It's just the thing about Smash Brothers is it's really a celebration of Nintendo's history more than a fighting game in a way.
Yeah.
And I think we appreciated that more this time than before.
Yeah, and
because we're so focused on like 1 versus 1 for so long, and yeah.
And as we've played Melee, Brawl, and now Smash 4, like we've become so much more appreciative of all the characters and all the lore that goes into that game, and all the background and the trophies, and and our skills at the game are getting better as well, which is always fun.
Sure. You could say that. I don't know.
I mean, they totally are.
You could say we've atrophied and we're like past the point of improving anymore because we're not good enough, but.
Well, we were just talking in our Discord server that we were thinking we should do a tournament when the Smash Switch comes out, and then
that's a good call.
We will find out who the TNL king or queen of Smash Brothers really is.
Let's be honest, Bally, we're both going to get knocked out round 1 and shown to be utter failures.
If that's our destiny, then so be it. But I'm going to try my hardest.
It's going to be, our listeners will show us the fuck up. I can tell you already. That was great. I enjoyed that. We had some fun back and forth matches. Lucina versus Mario, the all-time classic. You're a motherfucker because you don't have Cloud, so I couldn't kick your ass with Cloud. I was so disappointed.
Yes.
Hopefully he comes back. And then finally, for the weekend, for what we were playing, we had I laid down the gauntlet. I was like, Bally, I'm coming over. You have that SNES Classic? There's a co-op game on there that is perfect for a weekend playthrough.
You've got a sick mind, MBZ.
And that game is Contra 3, The Alien Wars.
Oh, God.
So recently, I've been watching a lot of Contra because over at Giant Bomb, Dan and Vinny have been doing a series called This Is the Run, where they basically try and get through a game in one continue, essentially, or one set of continue.
Without gaming over, basically.
Without gaming over, right? So without using a lives code or save states or anything. They have to do it from start to finish, because the way those games worked back in the day, the Contra games, was if you ran out of lives, you have to start from the very beginning all over. And obviously, like, because of that, they weren't overly long games. Like, one sitting, you could probably finish this game in 45 minutes if you were good enough. So it's possible to do that. But just watching them go through and seeing how, like, they build this knowledge and get better and better, and eventually, like, they're doing it to where they're getting to the last stage without even losing one continue. And I was like, this looks so much fun. Like, the idea of this kind of run-and-gun shooter with a friend, sitting down, and you're both focused, and you're both, like, discussing. It sounded like a great time. I'll tell you about it. I had a blast playing through this game. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. It was tough. There were some moments that were not fair in the slightest, but I had a great time, like,
absolutely
beating that game.
So yeah, the whole idea of Contra 3 is, I guess, like, there's aliens and they're invading and you just got to kill them.
That's
and
about it.
To me, it felt more boss heavy than stage heavy, because like a lot of the stages, you know, the first stage is like you're dealing with some enemies, and then you got a bunch of bosses, and then there's like top down stages, but like it really felt like the focus was on large bosses one after the other, which all had like specific patterns that you had to learn, and every time you got past one, a new thing would show up and just be bullshit and just kill you instantly, and you'd be like, okay, well now for next time I know we can do that. And so we started off trying to go through it and do it legit, like not using save states, and trying to like learn and get better and better. And we did all right. We got to like stage 3 multiple times. I don't know how many runs we did to get there. Maybe like 5 or something.
Yeah, it took a while, but we very legitimately got to sort of middle of stage 3.
Yeah, because we thought we were at the end of stage 3, and
we were
we were wrong. We were wrong.
So we did a good run, and then we save state at the start of stage 3, and then we did another good run, got basically to the end of stage 3, did another save state, and then eventually we just sort of, the gaps between save states got slightly shorter and shorter and shorter. And
yes, they did. It was mainly because like I was leaving and like we didn't have enough time over the weekend to do it. I think given the hyperbolic time chamber to lock ourselves inside, we could probably beat that game if we tried to just go run after run after run.
Yeah, we could definitely do it now.
I believe so, because like when you break it down, every boss in that game is very beatable. Every strategy they use, sometimes there's some randomness to it, but most of the time it feels like it's doable, and it feels like you can overcome the challenge.
And we were like learning tips and tricks all the way along every time we played, and like there are shortcuts where you can, if you have this one gun at this one angle at the screen, it'll cut off any enemy appearing, or if you do this one shot at this one time. And like we were learning things the whole time. Like on one of the levels, on the second top down level, you realized how you were meant to defeat that boss, where there's basically sand that causes your character to spin around wildly, and you're like, oh, Barry, if you just hold R at this exact moment, you'll constantly be locked on to the central boss. And it's like, well, right, yeah, of course, it makes sense. And then that's how we defeated it. And so it's like gradually, step by step, we were learning how to beat the game.
Right,
and we got
because
there.
It starts out and it's just like, what the fuck do I do here? Because the sand starts spinning and like there's fire shooting out and there are worms wiggling around, and you're like, oh dear God, how? Like, how did anyone do this?
We were just spinning around for ages. It would have taken hours and hours to beat in that
And then
boss.
like you figured out you press B to duck, so you can actually avoid the fire if you're fast enough on the button. Like you can duck out the way of the fire, and like you can maneuver yourself so that you move out the way of the worms. And then I figured out like, yeah, because L and R on the top down levels like spin you around, like spin your character, if you hold it at the exact right moment, you will basically be like moving to the opposite way that the thing is trying to spin you, and so it creates a moment where you are locked in place on the central eyeball.
Yeah.
And so through all those strategies that we figured out, like piece by piece by piece, you build up this portfolio of knowledge to where you're like, okay, next time I do that, we can basically do that without dying, and we can do it without taking a hit or whatever, as long as we're careful about it.
It really,
and that's super satisfying.
That satisfaction of bosses and getting like all your shots in on that one spot to defeat it felt very 2D Metroid in many ways to me. It's very satisfying.
God. It feels so good. Like when we both had homing missiles on the legs boss, like this boss who like has these legs he's walking on and he spins them around, and he took us a while to get our heads around, but like we both had homing missiles and we're just like, oh, and like just jamming them in, and he died so much faster, and it just feels so good when you take something down like that.
And like the weapons were a great part of that game, where we're like, right, you get the homing, you get the flamethrower, you get the spread, make sure we don't get the laser, just balancing guns, and like we each have 2 guns, and we were working out. It was just such a great time.
And like having favorites as well. Like you tended towards the flamethrower more than I did, and I was all about the spread. It was
really satisfying, and like it's a fun get. You feel like you're in an action film, and like the alien designs are cool, and like it's outrageous and stupid, but I mean it looks semi-realistic in a really cartoony, zany way, and it's fun. Like it was.
And I also think it just controls really well. Like it just feels good to jump and duck and hit things in that game. Like everything feels tight and well thought out. And yeah, like some hitboxes are bullshit, and you will get a tiny laser thing will hit you, and you'll be like, how did I die from that nonsense?
But for a game that came out near the start of the SNES's life cycle, because like you can order the games on the SNES Classic in like the order they came out. I think it's like the 4th game that came out of the
it's relatively early.
The 25 games or something you get on the system. So yeah, it's super early. It's a very impressive game, and like it's made me want to do another co-op intense something like intense.
I just want to play another Contra game now with you. I just want to go through and see if we can dig up some old ones. Yeah,
or like some co-op Cuphead, or I don't know. But
oh right, yeah, dude. Oh my god, if you enjoyed this, because that is the one thing I think about these old Contra games is a lot of the inspiration for Cuphead came from the bosses from these games. And the thing they do in Cuphead is like, okay, but how about if we take away all of the lives and like having to get to the boss first? How about if we just jump straight to the boss and just make that the challenge? Because that's the actual really fun part about it. And yeah, you can tell like a lot of inspiration came from the multiple stage, multiple phase bosses that we face, like especially the last boss where it's like, okay, well, here's a slot machine and let's see what you get. And that is very similar to a boss in Cuphead who's just like, okay, roll the dice, see what you get next. So you can definitely tell that, you know, that inspiration is there. And it's probably why I like this so much, because like I had that kind of initial burst of like, oh man, I really like this side-scrolling action in Cuphead. I want some more of it. And, you know, going back to these old games kind of gives me that feel as well.
And I love just the feeling of, oh, is that the final boss? Is that the final boss of this level? And then it's just like, nope. And then just see his hands tear through the wall and another boss appears.
That was the best moment.
God.
I think in stage 3, the best moment where like these two skeletons and they're like going across and we're like, God, these guys are so fucking hard. And then they turn into tiny bouncy ones. And then I killed the two tiny bouncy ones. I'm like, oh, fuck yes, we did it. And then these two claws just like jam out into the metal door in front of you. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And they just pull open and this just like horrible looking skull face thing like stares through and starts like firing shit at me. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like a great reveal though, like such a good moment.
There's loads of great moments like that in this game. It was just... the game knows what it's doing. That's the best bit. Like it knows it's not taking itself too seriously. It knows it knows it's really hard, and it was
it's out to kill you.
Yeah, it was just something that I don't think we've really done before in the same way. We've played co-op games here and there, but this is nothing this hard or this sort of short and concise.
Yeah, actually, my favorite thing about this game was when we died and we're like, okay, let's talk about this, you know, like let's figure out what the strategy is. And, you know, if someone was to like drop in on that conversation, they'd think we are mad people, because you're like, okay, so at the orange balls, make sure you don't go forward because the orange balls will kill you. Make sure you're ducking on the dick laser because, you know, it's going to hit you, and then jump on this bit.
In the face.
Yeah, exactly. Don't get hit by the dick laser, and make sure you have homing for, you know, the back panel or whatever. Like, it's just nonsense because it's like us figuring out strategies for what's going on in this game. But like, you need to do that. And like,
then when one of us forgot one of our rolls at a certain time, it's like, oh no, you forgot the laser. Like at that moment, you're like, oh.
The worst part about it is you look too similar. These two dudes look way too similar, and so I was like, oh no, I thought I was you that whole time, and now I died, and oh god, what have I done?
That happened a lot,
yeah. They definitely need to like make it more distinct, because it's just like, oh, you have blonde hair and you kind of look like you're naked even though you're not actually. That was the joke, that it was constantly like I'm playing as the naked dude even though he wasn't actually.
They realized eventually, he was quite tanned and had an orange,
very
tanned looking overall, I think.
Yeah, which is relevant to me because I used to have a passport where I was wearing a beige t-shirt and it looked like I was naked, so that was fun.
So you had to be that character.
And exactly, I had to be that character. But yeah, like even stuff like at the start of stage 4 where we figured out, oh, go to the right hand of the screen and just shoot up, and every single enemy that comes past will just die. And we also have the added benefit, it will get like 3 extra lives as a result of it. Like just making those your own strategies and making things that you are comfortable with, and like, okay, this is what we do at this bit, and this is what we do at this bit, and just executing on it constantly. That's the fun stuff. Yeah. So.
What an experience.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought that was great. So
great idea,
Contra 3. Yeah.
I was skeptical at first, and definitely 10 minutes into that first level, I was like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this?
The first level, like, you died after, like, maybe 30 seconds, lost all your lives, and I was like, oh boy, strap in, this is going to be a thing. So that was great. And so, yeah, that's pretty much everything that we played over the weekend, which was great. I'll just wrap up very quickly, because today I just finished Valkyria Chronicles. And I'm very, very, very happy with that game. It is so incredible. And I really think that, like, I got a mastery over it at the end, like knowing what I was doing and being able to get A ranks, which is like the highest rank possible you can get at the end. And I, like, the last 3 missions, like the final boss and everything, I got an A rank, and I'm like feeling really good about myself because, like, oh yeah, I've fucking broken this game in 2 and I know what I'm doing. But the thing that I realized the longer I played it was, if the game rewards speed, and because of that, a lot of the times you'll field a whole squad, and it'll be like you have 10 people that you can put out on the field. But for most of the maps later in the game, I tended to just not use most of those characters. I would use maybe 4 or 5 total, and those would be my core characters who would do most of the stuff. They would be making the big pushes, they would be dealing with all the problems, and that was the kind of way that I ended up playing it. And it's a different kind of game, because once it switches to that, it becomes very much about figuring out the strategies to get there fastest possible, as opposed to playing it more like a traditional strategy game, which is like, okay, taking everyone out and trying to clear the map of enemies, right? So that you can have a safe path through. And I like it. It was different, but it was also a way of understanding the systems of that game and how they work. There's a system where you can give orders to your troops, and those orders will, like, help them in certain situations. So you can give them a defense boost. There's this one called Caution, which is if they're caught in crossfire, like when they're running, they'll take, like, hardly any damage. And so there was a moment where my character Alicia, who's a scout, and a lot of people talk about the scout in this game because they're overpowered, because they can move crazy distances, but they are a bit frail. But if you level them up enough, like, they get certain skills that make them better. And one of her skills is called Resist Crossfire, which means if she goes, like, through a bunch of enemies who are all shooting at different directions at her, she'll take, like, hardly any damage from them. So I, like, defense boosted her, gave her Caution, which, like, boosted her, crossfire stuff. And she also activated Resist Crossfire when she was going through these enemies. And so I basically just fucking ran into this base where ordinarily you'd have to take out these turrets that just murder you. And I just ran past them, took like 0 damage, activated a switch, which then opened a door that was previously shut and was really hard to get through, and just ran the way through the back way and activated the second switch, and it was game over after like 3 turns. And I was like, wow. Like, I did like nothing aside from use this one character to get through this situation, killed practically no one, and yet the game, like, rewarded me and gave me an A rank for it. And I don't know, it seems a bit weird, because the way the game scores you is, if you're really bad, you'll get less experience and less money, because the rewards you gain are based on how well you've done on the mission. So it seems a little bit skewed, because, like, you can level up your characters and you can buy upgrades for your tank and for your weapons, but the worst players are going to be worse off, because if you get a D rank, you're going to get, like, hardly any experience and money, versus an A rank where they just fucking shower you in it. So, I mean, I understand, like, why they do that, because they want to encourage people to, like, do well, but also, this is a fucking hard game, and so people who are not good at it are not going to have a good time, because they're going to get bad rankings, and they're not going to have enough, like, income and experience in order to, like, make their characters better so they can get through it. So, I don't know, like, as a core design flaw, I think that may be one of the only problems I have with the game, but also I was good enough at the game that it actually benefited me, so I was fine with it. But yeah, and, like, the end of the game doesn't allow you to do the kind of bullshit that I was just talking about, like using your scouts, because it's very much about, like, killing hard bosses, and, like, there's a giant armored tank that you have to take down, and the final boss is just this dude who's really hard. I had to use a tactic of using 2 of my shock troopers who basically are, like, they shoot the most amount of bullets. They shoot like 20 bullets at a time, and if you have 2 characters who are friendly with each other, on one of their turns, a friendly character will help another character. So I got 2 shock troopers who were friends with each other, and, like, set them right next to the final boss, and they both just fucking unloaded into him. And, like, managing that and making sure that I got that done in a few turns was great fun. And yeah, I fucking love this game. This game is so incredibly good, and my biggest regret is I didn't fucking play it sooner, because I bought it like 2 years ago for £3 in a Steam sale. I'm like, people say this game's good, I should play this.
But you've been meaning to play it for a while.
Oh yeah, I've been meaning to play it for fucking forever, and I finally did. and I love it. I love it so much. It's amazing, and I'm so excited that we have a real sequel coming at the end of this year, and it's going to be on Switch as well, and that's great. I'm stoked. So, Valkyria Chronicles, I couldn't give a higher recommendation if I tried. It's amazing. I love it.
Great.
So, there you go. All right, well, we'll be back after this break with some of your emails. Don't go anywhere. We shall return.
Hello everyone and welcome to the second and final segment of today's show. 2-segment show this time. It's that time again. It's time for your emails. We always need more. We'd love you to send some in. Please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We really appreciate your thoughts, your concerns, your comments, your questions, your barking.
Absolutely. And you can alternatively go to our Discord and drop some questions in there, which we have one of this week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, our first question is from CB, who's from Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Bally and MBZ, I've been listening to every one of your podcasts since January 2017. I've always been a Nintendo fan, but it was hard finding a show that just wasn't boring. When I found your podcast, I was immediately hooked with your discussions on everything old and new. I probably would have never bought a Switch if it weren't for you guys and how you would get me pumped up about the new Zelda. However, with 4 kids at home, I've had less and less time to play games. It took a while for me to finally make the plunge. Now that I have it, I occasionally get to play with my kids who all love Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey. My 9-year-old and I have most recently been playing a lot of Celeste. I have to agree with MBZ that it is one of the best platformers of all time. The story is great, incredible soundtrack, and the platforming is brilliant. The Quiet and Falling track reminds me so much of some of the music in Final Fantasy VI on the SNES. Listening to your show has brought back a lot of the nostalgia of my memories as a kid, first playing the NES when I was 7 years old. Metroid came out around that time, and I remember always going over to my cousin's house to play whenever I could. I was wondering how both of you got started with video games. What systems, games, etc. were your favorites as kids? Also, what game do you think has the best soundtrack of all time? I'm really eager to hear what you guys think so I can go out and try your recommendations. Apologies if you've already talked about these subjects, but I haven't listened to all of your shows. Sorry for the long email. I've been wanting to write to you guys for the longest time, but kids, work, and school keep getting in the way. Keep up with the good work. I love your content and rarely find podcasts that I will listen to for as long as some of your episodes. It says a lot about how good your show is. Sometimes it takes up to a week to get through the longer ones, but I listen to it every time in the car. Cheers, CB from Phoenix.
Well, thank you, CB. It's a very nice email. I'm glad that you found us not boring as opposed to other Nintendo shows, maybe. But that's good to hear. I appreciate that. Yeah, there's lots of things that we played in the past and how we got started on video games. Bally, do you remember the first video game thing that you encountered? The first thing that you played when you were younger?
The first thing that I played, it was kind of like... very hard to think that my very first probably PC games, but my first memory of like a console was my cousin getting me the Game Boy Classic and my mum not being too happy about it. And
you mean the original Game Boy? Because I'm sure they're going to come out with the Game Boy Classic in their classics line eventually.
Right. So yeah, it's weird because that big original Game Boy, I think it is called the Classic. Anyway,
they just call it the Game Boy.
The Game Boy, the big grey block.
Right.
That was my first
brick
system, and I bought it. Well, it was given to me with it's a Game & Watch collection.
Right,
and it had like Manhole in it, and this other one with Cement, and the one with the with the signaling person who's appeared.
Oh, the flags.
Yeah, the flags. Yeah.
Did you play much of that? Because I know that you had it, but I've never really heard you talk about it or the games.
I didn't play anything like as much of that as I did compared to like this other driving game I had, which was, I mean, driving games on Game Boy were pretty bad. It was just that kind of, it was a strange sort of mode 7, but not even quite mode 7. It was sort of below mode 7 almost. It was hard to describe. I think the better drivers on that system were actually the top-down ones, which I didn't own, but I knew of. And yeah, then Pokemon came out, and that was like the bigger, more impressive lineup, impressive game for that system. That's one of my first memories. PC wise, it was a lot of stuff like SimCity, Lego Racers.
Wait. I don't think you've said you've played SimCity before.
I played quite a bit of SimCity 2000 on the PC.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like I've never heard you say.
It's
probably
hard,
have,
and every time I wanted to like try and make my society better, it would just turn into like this industrial, almost Soviet style. Like,
oh God, yeah.
Really polluted, not much fun city to live in, and then it's a hard game, but a very fun one. So that was one of the PC games, along with stuff like Lego Racers. I had played a ton of the original Lego Island.
Lego Island 2 in particular, I think, is the one that I have the most abiding memories of, mainly because my cousin had it on the PS1. And I remember one Easter where we had all basically went out and kind of had these houses out in the country somewhere, and he brought his PS1 with him, and all I recall is like we went on an Easter egg hunt and we played a bunch of Lego Island 2, and that's pretty much all I remember from that trip.
Lego Island 2 is like a modern game compared to Lego Island 1. Island 1 is awful. Like if you go back,
I remember watching Giant Bomb play some of it on a UPF a while ago,
and I remember you showing it to me, and you were like, "Bally, you've played this game." Like what? And it was so nostalgic and awful what I was watching. I couldn't believe it. Like it's like a first person game.
First person, which is so strange for a Lego game. You wouldn't imagine that at all.
And you do everything in that game first person, like driving, and there's like a wave race style part on the water where it was first person as well. And when you ride a bike, that's first person. Everything's first person. So it was just, that's a weird game. I also played a lot of SeaWorld Tycoon, which is like the Tycoon series. They did tons of spin-offs, and SeaWorld was one of them. It was a very easy game, but that style of just let's make a theme park and take in money and sort of that sim style, I definitely enjoyed for quite a while.
Yeah, that's weird, because it feels like those are the types of games that have been missing from consoles forever, because they're just the kind of things that you can't do. Yeah. And weirdly with Switch, it feels like you could do them again because of the touchscreen, you know?
I mean, you had like Zoo Tycoon on DS. I actually owned that. And
wait, really? You owned Zoo Tycoon on DS?
Yeah,
okay.
I bought it in the States actually on a holiday a long time ago. It's not a great port. Like, it's just not, it's fine, but it's not.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine it would hold up too well.
But yeah.
Yeah, that stuff is weird, because I remember Ali T playing loads of Age of Empires. Like, he was super into Age of Empires back in the day, and he just played that forever and ever. But I never played that style of game. Like, I actually remember my sister getting, I think it was Zoo Tycoon as well for computer, and that was quite a bit further down the line. She was like, I don't know, 10 or 11 when she got that for whatever reason. I don't know why she got it, but she was into it. And I never have tried one of those games properly. Like, I've never found the appeal, like the desire. Right. But it's one of those, styles of game that I would like to try nowadays and try and kind of see how I feel about it. But for me, I started, I guess, with some PC stuff as well. I remember the first thing I recall is my dad bringing home a copy of Hercules for his laptop.
I remember you playing that on your dad's laptop and coming around. That is a great game. I
really
think it's
fun.
Now available on the PlayStation Store, right?
It is, because it came out on PS1 and you can pick it up on PSN as a PS1 game.
Right.
But it I should do, yeah. And it was really nicely animated. Like, it was based on obviously the Disney cartoon, and it was basically a side-scrolling action platformer. And the first level is you going through like Phil's Island, like hitting all these dummies and stuff. And then you eventually got to like an area with centaurs. And my abiding memory is this area with the centaurs where they are in the distant and they're throwing rocks into the foreground. And I could never get past this one bit where there's like 3 centaurs in the distance, and I just couldn't get, like, they kept killing me or whatever. I just couldn't do it. And the one funny thing I remember is on the back of the box, there's a screenshot of a level where you're kind of Crash Bandicoot style, like running forward into the screen, and it's this kind of faux 3D with the Cyclops like chasing you.
Yeah.
And because it had a tiny little thing next to it that showed like a code, I could input the code to skip to that level. So I could basically try out that level despite the fact that I wasn't good enough to get that far in the game. And I think that happened quite a few times in terms of, like, I remember having the Attack of the Clones game on Game Boy Advance, and on the back of that box, or maybe in the manual somewhere, was a code for one of the levels later on in the game, and I always got stuck on, I think it was Camino. I got to Camino, and it was super fucking difficult, because, you know, it's just a side-scrolling action licensed game that had no difficulty balancing, or it was just poorly made generally. I enjoyed it, like that Attack of the Clones game, but I couldn't get past this one bit, and there was a code in there. It was like, oh, I'll skip forward, and that was the kind of thing back in the day. I would take every chance I could to see like more of a game, because I was either the game was so difficult that I couldn't play it, or I was just bad enough at games that I couldn't get past stuff.
Right.
But yeah, that Hercules game was great, and I should go back to it. And maybe, yes, as you suggested, I should grab it on PS3, I guess, because for some stupid reason, Sony still has not put PS1 games on PS4. Like, we constantly talk about this, but like people always like ragging on Nintendo, where's Virtual Console? And yet no one's telling Sony to get their fucking act together. PS1 games on PS4, it's terrible, I tell you. Anyway,
bad, yeah.
Yeah, it's awful. But then also, from my cousin, had an Amiga. Which
yes.
is an old kind of British PC, because the thing with UK is, like, back in the day, the NES was like the big hit for consoles in North America, but over here, because the PC scene was so big, you had all these things like Commodore and Amiga and all that shit, which were basically computers that had floppy disks that you could put in, and you could attach joysticks to them and use them to play games. And so my cousin, growing up, had an Amiga. And eventually, when he was off to university and he didn't need his stuff anymore, he gave it all to me. He was like 10 years older than me. And so I got this Amiga, which was basically my first game system that wasn't handheld. I actually think I probably got it before my Game Boy, honestly.
Wow, that's
so
impressive.
Like, aside,
and of course, your sister got a Game Boy before you.
Right, yeah. I mean, that happened because I have no idea why. For whatever reason, my mum thought that buying my sister a Game Boy would be smarter than buying me one, but that's not really the point. So I had this Amiga, which had a like big ass joystick with like 2 buttons or 3 buttons on it, a large thing that you could. It actually had like suction cups underneath, so you could like jam it onto the desk and it would stay stuck on the desk.
Remember, yeah.
So like moving the stick around, you wouldn't like accidentally.
Do you still know where that is?
So very sad, and I was actually complaining to my mum about this while I was prepping emails. I was like, hey, like to my dad, I was like, hey, do you remember what like number the Amiga was? Because like Amiga 500 or Amiga 2000 or whatever, they all had like numbers after them, because like Commodore 64 and then like all these numbers. And I was like, do you remember? And then my dad was like, I don't know, you can check when you get home. And I was like, no, Dad. Mum threw all that shit out and like sent it somewhere and like gave it to charity or something. She basically just got rid of it. And at the time I wasn't super caring, because I was like, oh, it's broken, like I can't, because it was like I couldn't boot it up anymore. I couldn't get anything to run. All the games were fine, like I could have kept the games.
But now you wish you could have tried to fix it.
And now that I was telling her, I was like, now that I'm so much more into like games and their history and like going back to things, oh my god, I would kill to have all those games back and the Amiga back and everything.
Yeah.
Obviously, it would probably still not work. Like, I'd probably have to find a way to either take it to someone to fix it or just find one that worked. But at least I could have kept the games, because there were so many games on there that I really enjoyed.
That's funny, because my mum is the complete opposite of your mum when it comes to that stuff. She will not throw anything away. And it really?
Because that's my dad. My dad doesn't throw anything away. That's why I was telling you in Brussels about how he keeps all his vinyl collections. Not even that,
nice.
but his all the kind of concert booklets he had every time he went to like gigs and stuff. So he has all this shit and like signed stuff and all that stuff in London.
I mean, I can't access most of the stuff my mum keeps because we keep so much that I just can't get to what I actually want. But it's there somewhere.
Where's it all stored? Is it in like some cupboard somewhere?
Oh, it's all over it. There's whole rooms of our house dedicated to, like, if my mum knew I was telling this on the podcast, she'd be pretty grumpy, but she's not going to listen to this. So, like, there's whole rooms just dedicated to crap. It's awful. But even when I rummage through a bit of stuff, I'll find like N64 boxes, like the cardboard boxes.
I remember we were trying to find something specific in your coach house one time, and we couldn't find it, and we're really bummed out about it. But you're like, it must have, and you would really, I think you're annoyed at your mum because she like moved it and put it away somewhere.
Right.
It was like a cartridge or something.
There's some things that I'm just like, Mum, don't touch it. Just
leave it because I want to know where this is when I come back and keep it. Yeah, for sure. So like some of my favorite games on the Amiga were Afterburner 2, which is a game I want to go back and play, and I can because they actually did a 3D remake on 3DS as part of the kind of 3D Classic series, and you can play Afterburner 2 on 3DS. So that's like £4 that I will eventually pick up at some point when I feel nostalgic enough.
Cool.
I'm like, I'm going to play some Afterburner 2 because that was like this essentially Star Fox style game that you're this military plane and like shooting things.
What year was Amiga in these games? When did they come out?
The original Amiga is 1985 apparently. Right. And so I was playing
this is before Star Fox.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all this stuff is before Nintendo was doing anything. Like all these computers.
Then why does Star Fox get so much like credit for like, oh my god, Mode 7 flying?
I don't know.
When other things had done it. I don't know. Maybe because it's the first console. I don't know, to do it.
Right, first console style thing, and also on the NES because the Super Nintendo. Was a system built primarily with 2D in mind. The idea of making something 3D on a 2D system, I think, was more of the thing there. And even then, Afterburner isn't super polygonal. It's mainly just sprites being, rotated and enlarged and stuff to give the illusion of like size and scope and distance, that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess in that case as well. There's a game called Whizball. I don't know if you remember.
Yes, it's a platformer where you're just a ball that bounces.
Yes, and I keep getting it mixed up with Whiz Orb because there's a game called Whiz Orb that I played on Steam recently, where it's basically a breakout game, but you have like magic powers and stuff, and it's kind of an RPG breakout game, which is really cool. And I played it a while ago, but it's called the one on Amiga is called Whiz Ball, and you're this green ball that like bounces across screens, and I don't know, does some weird platforming stuff, and I don't remember a huge amount about it, but I would love to go back and play that game. I played the Thundercats game, which was really good. It was another kind of action side-scrolling platformer.
You had the Simpsons game.
Well, it was a Simpsons game. It was Bart versus the Space Aliens or whatever it was called. Which again, I recently saw that on Giant Bomb on UPF. Someone played it maybe a couple of years ago. And I was like, oh, this game is actually really rough. And because we could never get past the first level. And I was like, man, this seems like we should be able to beat this first level of the Simpsons game. No, turns out that game is garbage and really, really fucking hard. And has really bad hitboxes. And like some of the late stuff in that level is just almost impossible. And it seems like a nightmare. So yeah, that's kind of one of those games that is more on the game than on me for not getting past it, which I guess happened relatively often. And then another one that I really loved was James Pond, which you're basically, I guess you're a penguin, and
you're a penguin, I think.
Right, and you're a secret agent penguin. Is it a seal? It's either a seal or a penguin. Either way, you're a secret agent seal. It's playing on obviously as James Bond, James Pond, and you go around again these kind of levels, the action platforming, and you can swim and shoot stuff. And I remember like going into doors, like going up this kind of staircase and having like different doors, maybe Mario 64 style that you went into. But that was cool, and I would like to like all these games that are so hazy in my memory because it was so long ago that I would really love to go back to.
Yeah. Like we've just talked about genuinely our first sort of memories of video games. We very quickly moved on to Game Boy Advance, and I bought an N64 secondhand, and then we were both like there for GameCube launch, and that was like, so yeah, these memories are pretty. I can't try and argue they were my best days of gaming. They were.
No.
I was just playing anything I was able to get my hands on. It wasn't as such like I had a good knowledge of what was good and what was bad.
Yeah. But in terms of like our favorites and stuff, I think, when I got my GameCube, I was pretty happy. When I had my PS1 and my Game Boy Color, that's where I kind of started. If you're talking about like kind of more mainstream stuff, and had good times. So, but he also asked about our favorite soundtrack. We might go a bit deeper on this at some point.
We will.
But off the top of my head,
it's going to be a TNL ranks at some point.
Probably. Off the top of my head, I would say probably my favorite soundtracks are mainly kind of RPG soundtracks. Xenoblade Chronicles is easily my number one. That's the one that is just so fucking amazing, and I still love. Xenoblade 2 actually is kind of challenging it to some degree, but it's tough. Those two are very good. And then Persona 4 I love, and Persona 5 has an amazing soundtrack. Those are the kind of more recent ones that spring to mind for me.
I've got 3 that spring to mind, all very different styles of games. Well, 2 of them are actually the same style of game, but anyway, one of them, I definitely agree, Xenoblade Chronicles, the original. Fantastic soundtrack. Very epic, just really grandiose. And it's classical as well as a lot of electric guitar and that sort of stuff.
Yes, I love that combination.
It's a great combo.
Yeah.
I talk about this game a lot, but Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze has one of the best soundtracks, I would argue, in all video games.
It's fine.
Sorry?
It's fine. It's nothing special.
It's more than fine. I won't try and Dan Reichert it on the podcast now. And I'd actually go for something like Shovel Knight. I really like that soundtrack, and not just the soundtrack of the original Shovel Knight, but the way that they remixed the original songs on the expansion, like on the DLC, not DLC, it's free DLC, but on like on the other quests, like when you're playing as Plague Knight, oh my god, what the Spectre Knight? Those quests are really like remixed. And I know they're going to remix them again for King Knight because I've already seen a bit of gameplay where they've done that. So yeah, those 3 games definitely top soundtracks. Yeah. And I was going to say, if you want, he mentions our sort of top like recommendations. I think a good place to start would be our top 50 games of all time, which we covered in episode 100, where we have the definitive TNL list of what we think.
Definitive, controversial statement, I guess, but
definitive until episode 150. They sort of are what we think jointly are the best 50 games of all time on Nintendo systems. So I'd highly recommend checking that out if you want some ideas.
Yeah, for sure. And also he mentioned Final Fantasy VI. I'd say that's a new addition to my favorite soundtracks list. I freaking love that soundtrack.
It's very good.
It's really good.
It's very good.
All right. Our next email is from Acerbus, who's from Durham, and he says, "Ahoy, mateys. I really think everyone needs to temper expectations a bit for whatever online service Nintendo is launching in September. While people are correctly including the regular asterisks of, it's Nintendo and online, so there is bound to be some problems with it, they are still, in my opinion, expecting too much. I keep hearing people speculate and expect Nintendo to be releasing a huge library of games with a Netflix-style service that allows you constant access to all of them. Meanwhile, Nintendo says this service is going to cost $20 a year. Come on now, boys and girls. There is no way that Nintendo would offer that for such a low price. So, what is Nintendo going to offer us in September for $20 a year? It's not going to be as robust as a full library of games right off the bat. However, I don't think they can get away with charging anything just to play online when we've been playing Splatoon 2 for free for over a year, and people have been playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for almost a year and a half. Maybe they will try and get away with this anyway, but I don't see it. I see things going a little bit like this. First, I think online gaming will be semi-gated off by this service. I can foresee a situation where you can, for example, download and play Mario Maker levels for free, but need the service to upload them. Perhaps in Splatoon 2 you can play Turf War for free, but the ranked modes or Salmon Run under the service. To be clear, this is just an example. I stand by that I don't think they will retroactively change what you have to access to in games that have already been released, such as Splatoon 2. The other side of the coin is Virtual Console, which I think will once again be sold piecemeal outside of the service. People may be up in arms about having to buy a Link to the Past for the 5th time, but they will. Many of them are probably the same people who put Versus Super Mario Bros. At the #1 eShop game for multiple weeks. If Versus Super Mario Bros. Was a test for whether or not consumers would still be receptive to piecemeal Virtual Console games, Nintendo got their answer loud and clear. In terms of the promised classic games offered by the Nintendo Online service, I would guess that each month you'll get a couple of free Virtual Console games a la PS Plus, which you can then keep and play as long as you stay subscribed. Perhaps every month you get one classic VC game and one with new additional online features. I know Nintendo Online talk has been exhaustive recently, but I think there is room to be both hopeful and realistic, and I don't see many people straddling that middle ground. Thoughts? Your good friend, Acerbis, and then he has a PS. I have a quick bonus question for Bally that I've been meaning to ask for a while. You've mentioned a couple of times that you're an avid board gamer. What are some of your favorites? What would you recommend for someone who is a keen tabletop gamer with friends at school and is thinking of introducing them to a new group of friends at uni? So, Bally, maybe we just kick it off with the board game thing.
Go with the quick bonus point.
Yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, so I sort of got really into board games at university and had like a board gaming group, and we'd sort of play what are sort of in the board game industry called gateway games. So in the similar idea of gateway drugs, it's essentially games that you play and teach with people to get them into the hobby of board gaming in order to want to move on and play other board games. So with that group at university, we've moved it past gateway games quite quickly, and we were like, we need more challenging stuff, longer, more in-depth stuff with more mechanics, more complicated things. And we actually ended up playing some games that last over 12 hours, for example, and just it was a bit crazy. So since I'm no longer with that group of people on a consistent basis, most of my board gaming experience has been introducing to new groups, and like multiple times. And I must have introduced to like 5-6 different groups of people in the past few years, like a board game, and I've had to teach that board game, and I've often been the only person who knows the rules and that sort of thing. So that's definitely where most of my experience lies in the last few years, and I would highly recommend as sort of introductory games Ticket to Ride as well as Settlers of Catan. Both of them have really great aspects where the best aspect, for example, is that the game finishes at the same time for everyone. So whether you're...
Shouldn't have anyone waiting, basically.
Exactly. There's a few games, and there's one key reason why a game like Monopoly is awful is that it knocks players out and it lasts for a very long time. Games that... The same with Risk. Like games that last a very long time that also knock players out are just an awful combination of a board game being beneficial to like a social environment, essentially. Right. So Ticket to Ride is made by Alan Moon, who's a British board game designer. It's a great game because both Settlers of Catan and Ticket to Ride have really good aspects that link luck and skill together. So as someone who's played a ton of those games, I will admit that I probably win more often than not. But that's not to say I could have bad luck and still lose, and likewise someone else who's just started the game could beat me. Like I'll probably win most of the time, but you always feel whether you've played the game before or not, like you at least have a chance. And whether you...
I think I won a game of Settlers of Catan with you and Shaq one time.
Right.
I just did, just randomly, so yeah.
Right. I think Settlers of Catan is this idea of... If you want the idea of trading and resources and gaining materials that you're using to build things and expand your empire to an extent, it's a really good base level game for that, because that's a mechanic that loads of board games use, like Civilization and this idea of collecting materials and expanding your empire. Settlers of Catan is the perfect game to start with if you want to do something in that sort of field. And the trading mechanic is very enjoyable, like saying, well, trading wheat and wood and stone. Like it's quite a short game. It lasts for like maybe an hour to 2 hours, depending on... I
like how a short board game is an hour to 2 hours.
Well, yeah, I mean, we say short board game. I mean, compare it to video games. Right? How many video games can you beat in 1 hour, 2 hours?
Yeah, right. But like board games kind of necessitate you sitting down and having to commit that time all at once.
You got to sit down. You got to commit. Absolutely. Ticket to Ride, I think it's my favorite game to teach because it's very easy to break up into parts. It's like, what's the aim of the game? What do I do on my turn? How do these two things link together? It's very easy to teach. I think those two games are a great starting point. I think King of Tokyo is another really good simple game. There's not really much skill in King of Tokyo at all. It's almost entirely luck based. It's it's very much like Yahtzee. You're rolling lots of dice, and that's essentially it. But you're using your dice to knock out other monsters and defend yourself from other monsters and power up your monster and use special abilities. And it's fun. The downside of that game is that it is knockout, but at the same time, it's a very short game. So you're only ever watching it for maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes at the most, waiting for the other players to finish. And it's actually a very fun spectator game. So don't be put off by the idea that players can get knocked out with that game. So yeah, those are 3 games just off the top of my head that I think are really great for actual... And I should say, these are board games. They're not like party games. Like there's a handful of deception style party games I'd also highly recommend.
Oh right, yeah.
In terms of board games, Settlers of Catan and Ticket to Ride, I could not recommend more, especially as gateway games that lead on to other games that have more complicated mechanics, that take the ideas of those games and go further with them. So yeah, highly recommend those 2.
Great. So then let's address the lion in the room. I don't know. The Nintendo's online service seems like a horrible, dangerous thing that we should all be afraid of. And, a service offers up a bunch of interesting points here. I want to kick it off, though, with like the idea of gated content and the idea of, okay, so we've offered you one part of this online service, and if you pay, you get access to the rest of it. How feasible do you think that is? And I know that he said, like, he's just using the example of Splatoon 2, like if they gated off Salmon Run, for example. Do you think they would do that retroactively to Splatoon 2, or do you think that would just be a bit too poisonous to the player base there?
It's interesting. I can kind of... I like a service's idea, and he even sort of not doubles down on himself, but he protects his own original idea of saying, even this is just an example, but ranked mode could be paid for, Turf War not paid for, and then he says, like, actually, that's just an example, but they would actually not gate something that's already available to everyone. And I kind of... It's interesting. I think that they would only do that if the other stuff you're getting with the online service is really good. I think it's a bit much. I think the worst possible scenario in all of this is that they gate stuff off in the way that a service has suggested, and on top of that, so you're essentially getting less content. You're getting less access, and you're paying money. And you're getting maybe one virtual console game a month on.
The less access would only be for people who don't pay the subscription fee. Like, so if you pay the subscription fee, you would have Salmon Run and ranked modes. And that
right,
kind of
but that you're paying for something that you had for free before.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I mean that's the whole thing here, though, right? Is because they're coming in and they're charging $20 a year, or however much in pounds it will end up costing. And they are saying that they're going to be charging to play online. And so if they do that, and if they are bullish and they're like, well, yeah, now you have to pay us for Splatoon 2, I can see them doing it, but also it feels like something that at the moment is very up in the air, especially because they've had such horrible feedback to their phone app, and they've delayed this once already, and we just don't know what their plans are. It feels like they may be thinking, okay, well, we can't take something away that we've given away for free for this lengthy period of time.
Have they ever retroactively charged something?
I don't think so. And I'm not sure that it's something Nintendo would like to do and get the negative PR from.
I think the closest thing they've done is constantly recharge you for downloading Super Mario World 4 times on 4 different systems. But
which, to be fair, other companies do that as well, but they never get any shit for it. So it's an awkward scenario, and it feels like they would really rupture the player base as well. Like, imagine people who just casually play Splatoon 2 and, like me, jump in for like a couple of games every once in a while. Those are the types of people who may not pay the $20 in order to get the access. And then what happens to the ranked mode if they cut that off? Then you suddenly have a longer waiting times because there are fewer players to populate it. Like, Salmon Run suddenly takes way longer. You don't have the variety in terms of matchmaking in order to get people of your equal skill level. It just, by adding the cost and taking stuff out, it adds way too many problems. And for that reason, I do feel like they wouldn't do that. But for new games, anything's on the table, right? Because straight out the gate, you have to deal with that situation.
I think that you're right. The idea of new games is an interesting one, where this could be a line in the sand. So sort of Splatoon 2, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and ARMS are gated off in the free realm forever. Like they might.
You've already had access to
them.
They will continue to be free, whatever. But
then
Smash Brothers is coming out.
Smash Brothers is coming out. Smash Brothers has to be after the line in the sand for this to be a good idea for them in terms of a business model, because that's how you're going to get everyone on board. Likewise, there could be another Mario Kart further down the line on Switch, an original Mario Kart. Who knows? There could even be another online experience like an F-Zero or a Wave Race. Who knows? Or Mario Maker, which is far more likely than those other two I mentioned. There's a lot of games that could be online in the future that will be within the pay bracket.
Yeah, that definitely seems like what will happen, but there are multiple ways they can approach it. And an idea I've recently floated about for Smash Brothers is, so they're clearly going to be doing DLC fighters. Like, it's too obvious for them not to. It was so successful last time, and they've seen such success by giving updates to things like ARMS and Splatoon, and people keep coming back for those, and obviously those are free. Smash Brothers stuff in the past has been paid. What if, for Smash Brothers, they say for people who are part of their online subscription, whenever new characters get added, they just have access to them straight away. And people who aren't paying for the online service can buy them piecemeal and can have them and whatever. And say if you stop paying for the online service, then you lose access to them. But as long as you pay for that online service, you keep, like the PlayStation Plus games, you keep access to those extra features and characters and all the updates that they would ordinarily do for a game like Smash Brothers. And I wonder if that's a way for them to make people feel like they're getting a good value out of it, as well as offering a a la carte solution for people who don't necessarily want to pay, a monthly fee, but are like, hey, I want to have Cloud, I'll do £5 for him,
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. I mean, I think once you bought all the Wii U DLC,
it almost cost the same as the game.
It was quite a lot of money. It was a lot of money. So if you just say, yes, our subscription is a lot. Well, it's not even a lot of money. Is it confirmed for $20 a year?
Well, that's what they've said. It's the equivalent in yen, and I think they might have even said $20 is the
fact
amount
that
for the
it's
US.
So cheap per year is making me a little scared. They could get away with murder, is my point. Like they could offer you so little for $20 a year.
Exactly, right? Because their competitors are doing 60. They need to essentially be like, okay, well, we're offering them a third of the value our competitors are, which, right now, the online service, in terms of connectivity and being able to get into matches and smoothness of play, is perfectly fine by my count. Splatoon 2 I've had great fun with and haven't had many issues at all. Like, sometimes they'll drop out, but for the most part, it works as intended. And aside from the voice chat complaints, which I don't really care about anyway, it's not been a big deal. So, like, if they're charging you just for the same experience online, and it's only $20, they do need to justify it, but I don't know to what degree they need to justify it, right? Because it's not a huge amount.
The second you start thinking about virtual console games and a PS Plus model, and if they were adding one virtual console game, even one a month, so that's 12 games for $20 and the ability to play online, it's already, in my mind, a really good deal.
Well, for me, it's already in my mind what Nintendo would consider a really good deal. I don't think I would consider that a really good deal, especially when the virtual console games are probably going to be...
But you're a PC gamer who pays 50 quid for 100 games.
No, but that's not even the point, Bally, because the virtual console games they've already suggested they're offering are NES games, which, let's be fucking frank here, most people either pay nothing for those games because they'll just download an emulator on PC and play them, or have bought them 50 fucking times. So, great, Super Mario Brothers 3 is there. Do I give a shit? No, because that game is worthless in terms of, the value that it adds. It doesn't add any value to me.
But the second they throw in Super Nintendo games or a Game Boy Advance game, an N64 game, and so say they've got...
Right, but how long will that take? Because I see it in the way of, probably at least for the first year, if they're doing NES games, they're just going to keep doing that. And then, do they change it partway through when they get feedback from people? How does it evolve? It feels like not enough at all. And if they are going to do it, they need to either up the number of games they're doing on a monthly basis, which I think was the first suggestion they had, was like, okay, Dr. Mario and Balloon Fight and Mario Brothers 3, right? And whether they start sprinkling in more systems along that trend, like as they go, that could be good. But it's weird.
The second they sprinkle in more systems, I do think that is quite appealing at that low price.
It gets more appealing, but also your mileage may vary because you don't have the choice of what games are going to pop up on there. And obviously, it's the same with PlayStation Plus as well. Like, they could offer a game that you've already bought, and then you feel bad about it. You're like, oh, well, I'm not getting my value this month. And so it almost encourages people to not buy a la carte, which is why I find that theory of like having a la carte as well not necessarily so stable, because if you give people the option but also have the knowledge that they could potentially get it for free later, people I think more often than not will wait on the potential to get it for free later, and so that's a risk there. Like, whether they include a la carte, it may kind of bite off their own tail,
It's interesting because you think about the Nintendo library. We've talked about it loads of times on the show before, just that there's a wealth of awesome games. The Switch really, really appeals to a brand new generation of people whose first Zelda is Breath of the Wild.
Sure.
And I'm sure Nintendo is dying to make as much money from them as possible. Like, these people probably should play a game like Ocarina of Time at some point in the near future. Mm-hmm. And this new virtual console, whatever it's going to be, is a great opportunity for Nintendo to do that. And if they keep kicking this down the line, and the idea of Ocarina of Time a game like that, it's kind of drifts away in the minds of a lot of these new Switch owners who are new into Nintendo.
I mean, it's already drifting away. Like, obviously Breath of the Wild is still very popular and it still sells very well. Like, it's no GTA 5, but nothing on the goddamn
I just mean
Earth
there's a bit of a window that they should hit while the iron's hot to an extent if they want to sell their back catalog.
I mean, I honestly feel like that window closes like pretty soon, and they're starting that online service around the time when I think it would be. But I don't know. I maybe I'm wrong about that, but it feels like this is way too fucking late in the game to throw in an online service and start taking things away from people and messing with the positivity of the Switch. They've put themselves in a really bad position, honestly, because had the online service come out with Splatoon day one, people would have been fine because they would have gotten used to the idea of paying for online, and they could have like developed it from there and maybe changed things. But their idea of kicking it down the line really tells me that they still don't know what they're doing. DNA clearly hasn't helped them in any way. Like, the whole idea that Switch day one still had fucking friend codes. Are you kidding me? It really just feels like Nintendo bought this. Well, I guess they own like a large part of DNA now. Like, they got in bed with this company who ostensibly are there to fix their online issues. And quite frankly, they've done nothing to show me any confidence that they can do this well. Which is weird. It's like, why go out there and do that?
I don't know how they announce this in September, if that's when, or it comes out in September and announce it at something like E3. I don't know how they turn this into something positive, because I don't know what.
The only way they can make it positive is to really blow it out and make it seem like a really high value. Like, the idea of a more open Netflix-style library of games of, like, say, 100 at a time. If you had access to 100 at a time, which is a huge amount, and obviously, like, old games have less value than new ones, but even looking at Xbox Game Pass, that thing has, like, over 150, 200 games, and that's $10 a month. That's $10 a month, which is $120 a year, which is so much more money than what Nintendo are asking for. So the idea that people think that we're going to get this big Netflix-style library of, like, hundreds of games just does not seem feasible for $20 a year. It just doesn't seem like the type of value they would offer.
But then you wonder if they will even trickle out an N64 game every other month or something. Like, it's that low amount of money that, I mean, if I wanted to buy Ocarina of Time on Wii U a la carte right now, I think it cost me £7.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Like, £7 in dollars right now is, I don't know, $10. So
right,
for 14 quid or whatever, I'm like, could they get away with just giving you 2 N64 games a year like for $20, and that also includes you having the ability to play online. Like, my point is, like, there's no positive way of looking at this announcement. Like, they have to do something that is crazy value for money, and if there's one thing about Nintendo is they're so rarely value for money when it comes to like, their systems or their first party titles. Like, you are paying a premium for that Nintendo seal of approval. Like, it's not gonna be, I can't see how this announcement is going to be something positive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just very interested to see if they can weather this storm and figure it out. And obviously I don't have confidence because they've given no reason to give them confidence. But, like, what if they do drop the phone app and they're like, oh, hey, just chat on your fucking device like normal people?
Here's an idea. Smash Brothers, you cannot buy Smash Brothers a la carte. It is only
oh my God,
as part of the service.
That's
and with that service, you get all the characters, like you said.
That's too good to be true. That's disgustingly good. Because, like, $20 a year for Smash Brothers in 3 years, Americans would only have just paid off the price of Smash Brothers, you know? Like, that seems... But then I guess they keep paying for it again and again, and eventually they'd probably end up having paid for more, like, after 10 years. But that's a long con. That's a long con of a high degree.
Pay $20 a year if you want base level Smash Brothers. Pay $40 a year.
No,
if you want Cloud. If you want Cloud, you got to pay $40.
Bally, you should go get a job at EA. I'm telling you right now, you'd monetize those teens. You'd know what's going on. Yeah, I don't know. I think this whole thing just seems like a mess, and they haven't communicated it well in any way. Honestly, because I don't think they know what the fuck they're doing right now. And hopefully, they have some kind of game plan that makes sense. The bare minimum I expect is in September, Smash Brothers will come out, and so will the online service. And we'll just get what they've already said, which is, okay, you're going to get 3 NES games a month, and you're going to have to pay to play online.
And that'll be
that seems the most realistic to me.
Yeah, it's pretty realistic. It's a pretty damp squib of an announcement.
It is, there you go. But like, you know, what else are they going to do? It's Nintendo, so I don't know. They are a new Nintendo to some degree, but I don't know how much they're going to change from that front. It seems like there are still those issues to be ironed out. But anyway. Enough of the negativity. We can be hopeful about the future, and you know, this podcast will be here discussing all the issues regardless of what boneheaded decisions Nintendo make. In fact, the boneheaded decisions Nintendo make this show more interesting. So there you go. Bally, that's the end. That's the podcast this week. We have a few things that we need to talk about before we get on out of here, starting with a thing that you were talking to me about. The British Podcast Awards are happening right now, and apparently there's a listeners kind of selection thing you can do. So if you go to
the listener's choice,
right? So if you go to www.britishpodcastawards.com/vote, that's britishpodcastawards.com/vote. I'll try and put it in the description as well. You can just type in the name of a podcast and click on them, and then all you need to put in is your name and your email. So hey, even if you live in America, which I know like 90% of our listeners are US based,
don't tell them you live in America. Just pretend you live in the UK.
You can go to that website and vote for us there. And I doubt we're going to get anywhere, but we'll see. It could be fun.
And it honestly takes less than a minute. And
it takes like really 2 seconds.
We don't know where this will go, but it's worth a shot.
Yeah, it could get us some nice exposure. So if you'd like to help us out, go to britishpodcastawards.com/vote. Just type in ThisNintendoLife, and we should pop up, and then just your name and email, and off you go. 2 seconds of your time. That would be very appreciated. You can also help us out by reviewing us on iTunes. That's always a great thing to do. It helps grow the show and gets more people listening and all that good stuff, which means we get more great emails like we had today. So you can go over to iTunes and do that. Takes a few minutes of your time. Very much appreciate reviews or ratings. Yes, we're only asking for, let's say, maximum 5 minutes of your time on the show.
5 minutes.
Yeah. And then obviously at the top of the show we plugged our new TNL Ranks episode, so that's on our Patreon, which is patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, and we recorded in person in Brussels. It was great fun. Really enjoyed talking
our top 5 video game systems of all time.
Yeah.
Quite the topic.
Yes, absolutely. So you can go check that out, and I would also like to thank our patrons, our top tier patrons, Bally.
Thank you to our 2 top-tier patrons. They are, of course, Atari, Alex, and my girlfriend, Caroline. Thank you very much for your $10 tier support. It is greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you to all of our other patrons as well. And you can find us in various places. Bally, where can people find you on the internet?
Please find me on Twitter. I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91. And of course, check out the podcast Twitter account, which is at TNL Podcast. That's at TNL Podcast. It's the best place to go to find links to our Patreon account, our YouTube channel, our Discord server. We're having a good time on Discord. Lots of chats going on. Make sure to come on in. You're very welcome. It's a good
and there
community.
should be like a Discord invite link in the description of the show as well. So if you want to get there from your phone, you can do that too, which is nice and easy. You can find me on the internet. I'm at LordNBZ. You can find us on various places such as iTunes. We're on all the podcatchers out there. You can download us. We're out every 2 weeks. So subscribe to us on those places and you'll automatically get your podcast into your feed straight away. It's the best thing to do. We love subscribing to podcasts. You should go do it. It's fun. And I guess that is pretty much it. Bally, any closing thoughts before we leave today?
That last weekend really makes me want to play more Smash Brothers. So I'm really excited about this Switch version.
Well, as much as we don't really know what Nintendo are going to do with online, I think we have a safe bet that Smash Brothers will be a good video game we'll enjoy playing. So I think that's...
Right.
It's a definite positive to come out of this. So in any case, thank you everyone for listening. We'll be back in another couple of weeks' time with another episode of This Nintendo Life. Thank you, and goodbye. The musical interlude used on today's show was Stage 4 from Contra 3 The Alien Wars. Copyright Konami 1992.